Crimson skies bathed the Empire's palaces and domes as the sun set. Inside the grand halls of the kingdom, the man receives word, very good. The Cladene has secured the northern border. The king, seated on his gilded throne, praises him with a measured smile. But his praise is only the prelude. His sharp gaze turns to the young commander. "Tell me, how old are you now?" The reply comes with firm respect. 24, Your Majesty." The king leans back, satisfaction glinting in his eyes. "A fine age for marriage. Then, I shall grant you a bride from my royal bloodline." The court stirs in shock. Whispers echo against the tall pillars. A princess? The hidden one? Wasn't she long thought dead? Then, as if to confirm the rumors, the grand doors creak open. A young woman steps forward, barefoot, fragile, clad in a plain white dress. Her golden hair cascades down in waves, and her piercing blue eyes flicker with fear and hesitation. Gasps fill the hall. The courtiers murmur, astonished. "It's Princess Misa. She lives." Her steps faltered. She could barely stand under the weight of all the stairs. Her brother, seated high upon the throne, beckoned. "Misa, come here!" She staggered forward, clutching at her chest, breath uneven. Fear overtook her body, her knees buckled, and she collapsed with a soft gasp, her golden hair spilling across the cold marble floor. The court held its breath. The princess? Is she even able to walk? Without hesitation, Eric stepped forward, kneeling beside her. Carefully, he took her hand and pressed his lips against it, sealing his vow in front of all. "It is my honor to serve you, princess." But Miasa yanked his hand. Her heart pounded violently. Her wide blue eyes trembled, confusion and fear flashing within them. "Miasa," the king's cold voice rang out, echoing through the chamber. "That is no way to greet your husband. Come here." He drew his sister close, clutching her as though she were both a prized possession and a pawn. "The one I cherish more than anyone, yet she lacks manners. Come now, offer your apologies." The young girl's lips parted, her breath uneven. Her voice broke into fragments, barely a whisper. Eric's gaze hardened. He said nothing, but his eyes followed every cruel gesture, quietly witnessing the merciless scene unfolding before him. The sun dipped behind the horizon as the carriage wheels rattled steadily over the dirt road. Inside sat stern faces, the Margrave and his wife, their silence sharper than any sword. It had been a long war, but the banners of triumph fluttered, and songs of victory echoed through the land. The Cladene knights, ironclad and unyielding, had carved their legend into the battlefield, securing the Empire's glory. For while the people praised Cladene's valor, the king, seated high upon his throne, was far from pleased. Power unsettled him. The growing influence of one house made his crown feel heavier. And so, with cold calculation, he devised a binding chain disguised as a gift. A marriage. That very night, at a grand hall, voices rose in anger. Fists struck tables. "Is this all? After everything we sacrificed? A foolish princess is our prize?" But amid the outrage, one voice cut through the storm. Calm, composed, and resolute. "We cannot refuse the king's command." Eric Cladene, the young lord, spoke with steady eyes. "The wedding is inevitable," he continued, a shadow crossing his gaze. "Even if the marriage is unwanted." Lifting his knife, he sliced through his meal with the same precision he carried on the battlefield. His conviction was clear. Personal feelings mattered little in the face of duty. At the other end of the table, his cousin Amberic finally broke the silence, his voice tense. "What about the engagement to the Crispin family?" But the answer was already known, and another voice snapped in response. "Do you even have to ask?" Eric himself, bound by duty, wore his mask of calm. To him, the marriage was no union of love, but a battlefield of politics, one he could not refuse. The days blurred, the tension thickening, until finally, the wedding day dawned. The capital came alive, streets buzzing with gossip and curiosity. Citizens flocked to see the princess who was to wed the hero of Cladene. Inside the grand carriage, the groom sat tall in his regal attire, his expression calm yet shadowed with thought. Draped in white and gold, he looked every bit the part of a fairy tale prince. The groom stepped forward, his boots striking the marble floor with measured grace. Then the great wooden doors creaked open. A hush fell. All eyes turned as the bride appeared at last. The princess, radiant in her flowing gown of white lace, entered the hall. She looked ethereal, like a figure sculpted of moonlight. But soon, murmurs broke the silence. "Good heavens, is she unwell? She looks as if she's drunk. She can barely walk." The sacred hall fell silent as the vows were spoken. The priest's voice echoed, steady and solemn, binding two fates together. The words rang heavy, final, like iron chains disguised as holy blessings. "You may now kiss the bride." Eric leaned down, his gloved hand gently cupping Miasa's trembling face. Their lips met, a seal, a spectacle, a kiss that would fool the world. Applause filled the cathedral, muffling the silent despair in Misa's eyes. Night descended. The palace shimmered under the stars. Inside, attendants bowed deeply. You must be cautious not to hurt the princess. We will come by tomorrow morning to collect the evidence that proves you have fulfilled your marital duties, my lord. Understood, Eric's voice cut through the chamber. The heavy doors creaked open. Step by deliberate step, he entered. Inside the chamber, Misa lay bound and weakened, her wrists tied, her body trembling. Sedatives had been forced upon her, enough to still even a beast of burden. Eric's sharp eyes took in every detail. The shallow breaths, the unnaturally pale skin, the cruel restraints. His jaw tightened. Even prisoners of war are treated with more dignity than this. He knew instantly, this was not the work of petty malice. Only the king himself could have sanctioned something so merciless. Stepping closer, he crouched by her side. Her body was ice cold, temperature frighteningly low. He freed her wrists, gently massaging warmth back into them. But it wasn't enough. Desperation pressed upon him. There was only one way left. Princess, he murmured, voice low, steadying himself for what must be done. I will share my warmth with you. Please don't be surprised. He slipped beneath the blanket, pulling her frail frame against his chest. Then, as if formally introducing himself for the first time, he spoke with quiet solemnity. My name is Eric, son of the Claudinei family. I am 24 years old and have no brothers. I once had a younger sister, but I lost her in an accident when I was young. His voice grew heavier. Since then, I've been living on the war front, and yet, the princess is the one who held a wedding ceremony with me today. He looked at her, so pale, bound by cruel fate and sedatives. Doubt flickered in his eyes. Does she even understand any of this? Still, he knew one thing, she deserved to know. Winter in the border is brutal, he muttered. His hands gently reached for hers, icy to the touch. Frostbite begins at the ends of the body. It's more important than anything to get the blood flowing again. The princess stirred faintly, a soft sound escaping her lips, and her pale cheek showed a hint of returning color. Relief washed through him. Good. She's feeling better. Her complexion is returning. Yet another concern pressed on his mind. Proof of the first night was required. Without it, suspicions would rise. He stood, scanning the room for what he needed. His eyes fell on the delicate glass vessels, an idea forming. He sighed quietly, the weight of duty evident. By morning, dressed in simple garments, he stepped out, carrying the stained cloth, symbol of a consummated marriage. With a calm but commanding tone, he handed it to the waiting maids. It is proof of holy marriage, he said. The women bowed respectfully, promising to deliver it to the king. As they prepared to attend to the princess, Eric halted them. Wait, the princess hasn't woken yet. Please do it later. The maids exchanged glances but nodded. We understand. We'll let her rest then. Inside, Eric leaned against the door, exhaling deeply. Later, faint sounds caught his attention. He turned and found the princess sitting on the floor, her golden hair spilling over her shoulders, chewing absently on the corner of her blanket. Eric's brows furrowed. Princess, that is not for eating. But she ignored him, continuing her strange nibbling. Amused yet worried, he retrieved bread from the basket. Kneeling before her, he held it out. Seems you're hungry. Please wait a moment. How about this? The princess blinked, then reached hesitantly. As soon as the warm loaf touched her lips, she nibbled eagerly, her eyes softening as though tasting food for the first time. Eric couldn't help but smile faintly. I'm glad you like it. Later, the palace gates creaked open to welcome them back. Word spread swiftly, Master Eric has returned. But this time, he was not alone. By his side was the princess. At the sight, the household gathered. Nobles and servants alike exchanged glances, yet beneath the polite acceptance. The master of the house clenched his hands behind his back. Moments later, chaos unfurled. The princess, as though moved by some untamed impulse, climbed onto a great stone statue in the gardens, her attendants panicking below. Princess! That's dangerous! Please, come down! They cried, their voices sharp with fear. Margrave's jaw tightened as Eric strode forward, lifting her down with firm, steady arms. Please give the princess to me, one of the attendants begged. You should rest, master. I'm fine, he replied firmly. His voice allowed no room for argument. The princess has become a member of our family today. Since she is under my care, take caution when tending to her. The butler bowed deeply. Understood. We will take care of her, don't worry. Evening descended, and the family gathered at the long dining table. Eric's voice broke the stillness. He addressed the attendants hovering nearby. I'll take care of her during the meal. You may go back to rest. The servants exchanged knowing glances. One of the older women spoke, but the princess has a lot of difficulties, especially when eating, my lord. Slowly, Eric guided a dish toward her. My lady, he said softly, almost coaxing, would you like to eat this? For a moment, she simply blinked at him. Then, haltingly, she opened her mouth. But before he could sigh in relief, she spat the food back out. Shock rippled across the table. Gasps erupted, whispers buzzing like angry bees. The atmosphere shattered. Eric immediately caught her hands, restraining her. "Please calm down, my lady," he murmured. Behind her, the princess's personal maids laughed softly, a mocking glint in their eyes. "Prepare to clean up the lady," Eric commanded. The maids exchanged glances, then stepped forward with rehearsed obedience. "Understood," they replied, their tone laced with quiet disdain. Long ago, in the kingdom of Esquilor, there were 3 houses that were called the 3 pillars of the kingdom. The house of Selakese, which kept the kingdom's internal affairs stable, the house of Crispin, which kept the kingdom's public order and security, and the house of Cladini, which protected the kingdom from external threats. Each of them has a powerful influence over the kingdom's affairs and military power. The previous king of Esquilor had 3 queens from each house. The first child born from the first queen, the daughter of Duke Salakes, was Burmalik II, the tyrant king. Burmalik ignored his duties as king and oppressed the land with violence. Under the pretense of protection, he massacred the house of Salakes, his own mother's family. And, still not satisfied, he persecuted the remaining 2 houses as well. So, unable to bear his abuse any further, the 2 houses decided to unite by setting up an engagement between heirs of the house so they could launch a coup as the war ended. However, things didn't go according to plan, as the king decided to take action against this threat to his power. "I heard that child was originally fine, but they say she went mad the moment she saw the people of the kingdom dying. Pitiful, isn't it?" Lady Cladini added with sympathy. "Do you think we are in any position to pity her?" Duke Margrave snarled, his fist crashing down on the table. "This morning, some vassals said they should put Amberic in your place as the heir." Duke Margrave sneered, swirling his wine. "Is Prince Hagal still hesitating?" His lips curled in disdain. "He is also weak-hearted. The king's cousin, a man of royal blood, the last surviving heir of the direct royal line aside from the king himself. But fate had not been kind to him. One tragic accident had left Hagal crippled, bound to a chair, unable to sire any children and even step into the light. And yet, his very existence made him a dangerous pawn on the chessboard of power." Duke Margrave's temper finally snapped. His fist slammed against the table. "Nothing works. Nothing changes." His rage echoed even after he stormed out. Lady Margrave leaned forward. "That kid," she said softly. "Do not show her affection. There is nothing flimsier than the affection of a man," she advised. "Do not cause that poor child any further pain." Eric was shocked seeing her mother concerned, then nodded in agreement. Later that night, Eric walked down the corridor, his steps firm and steady, but his thoughts heavy. The maids whispered from the side, their words laced with disdain. "Do as I say, you mad woman," one muttered. "Is she energetic because of the good food they gave?" Another added. "But did you see the look on their faces?" They continued until Eric entered. "You did well. Now you can rest. I will take care of her," he ordered. Though he had only heard a little, it was enough for him to understand how the princess had been treated by these maids. Both maids hesitated, fearing he had overheard them, then quietly left. "It seems like you are in a good mood today, my lady," Eric said, approaching her. He sat quietly beside her. "I don't know if you can understand me," he said softly, "but I hope you are comfortable here." The princess slowly lifted her head, her wide blue eyes meeting his. For a fleeting moment, clarity sparked in her gaze, and Eric felt his chest tighten. Was she beginning to understand him? The next moment, the princess suddenly spat at him. The act made everything clear. She hadn't understood a word he had said. Eric froze, stunned for a moment, then slowly wiped his face. "My lady? You should not spit on another's face," he said gently, almost as though advising a child. Then he let out a faint sigh. "Rest now," he added, his tone soft but firm, before turning away and leaving for his bath. The princess said nothing, her expression unreadable. As the night deepened, they eventually lay in bed together. Outside, a thunderstorm rumbled across the darkened sky. Lightning split the clouds, followed by the heavy roar of thunder. The princess's eyes shot open wide. Fear flickered in them, though she stayed silent, lying stiffly in the sheets. She did not move, only stared at the man sleeping peacefully beside her, her gaze unblinking as the storm raged on. The following day, they sat for breakfast. Eric, ever patient, tried to coax her. "Did you sleep well last night?" he asked gently. Her complexion looked pale, worse than before. "You seemed fine before bed, but now—" His words trailed as he studied her expression. Suddenly, she clutched at the food with her bare hands, smashing it messily across the plate. The hall fell quiet, the servants frozen at the display. Eric, however, only sighed softly. The past few days since the princess's arrival had been nothing short of hectic. The entire atmosphere within the mansion had shifted ever since Eric married her. It felt as though everyone had something to say, yet all held their tongues. Margrave Cladini eventually stopped joining his family at meals, which only fueled Lady Cladini's irritation. Even the vassals serving House Cladonay seemed at a loss, unsettled by the sudden turn of events. And yet, in the midst of it all, Eric remained unchanged, calm, collected, and unwavering, as though none of it affected him. After finishing his training, Eric asked, "Where is my wife?" "She is in the maids' area," the attendant replied cautiously. Eric paused, wiping sweat from his face with a towel, his brows furrowed. "Again?" He made his way down the corridor. A faint light slipped through the crack. Inside, the princess was curled up on a pile of laundry, fast asleep, her golden hair spilling over the soft fabrics. The maids whispered among themselves. They admired her quietly, marveling at how even in slumber she looked fragile yet beautiful. One maid chuckled softly. "She looks like a white cat. So cute." Suddenly, a knock startled them. "Oh, young master has arrived!" One maid gasped, and they quickly scrambled to their feet. Eric stepped in, his sharp eyes scanning the room. "Are the two maids away again?" he asked. The young maid stammered nervously. "Yes, my lord, but we took good care of her." Eric nodded curtly. "Good job." He walked to the princess and lifted her into his arms, her head lolling softly against his chest. "I will now take care of her now," he said. The princess stirred faintly as he descended the grand staircase with her in his arms. But suddenly, her body tensed. Her blue eyes widened, panic flashing within them. She let out a choked sound, thrashing violently against his hold. Eric grunted, tightening his grip to steady her as she struggled desperately, kicking and clawing. "Please wait until I drop you off," he said firmly. "If you fall, you will get hurt." She groaned, still resisting, but eventually quieted. At last he set her down on the bed. She clutched the blanket tightly, glaring at him with frightened, trembling eyes. Eric remained silent, watching her carefully. Days had passed since she arrived, and one thing had become painfully clear. The princess did not seem to like him at all. To her, Eric thought bitterly, "I must be nothing more than a means of transportation, someone to carry her around." Eric's gaze followed. There, tangled in her golden hair, was a piece of yarn. Eric leaned forward, carefully brushing her hair aside, but she hides her face, clearly startled. "I didn't mean to startle you. I'll quickly remove what's on your head," he murmured softly. "Were you very surprised?" he asked quietly, his eyes watching her closely. The princess's bright blue gaze flickered up at him, tense and guarded. "White. I once saw a cat that looked like her." The memory of the maids chatting stirred faintly in his mind as he smiled to himself at the thought. As night deepened, the princess lay in bed sleeping silently. While in another room lit only by candlelight, Eric sat at his desk, buried in documents. There was these maids, always slipping away whenever they got the chance. Eric's instincts screamed that they were hiding something. He sighed deeply, pressing his hand against his temple. "There's too much to worry about," he muttered, thoughts drifting to the food shortage plaguing the territory's people. One particular sealed letter drawing his focus. The letter carried a report from a spy he had arranged. As instructed, they had followed Margrave's movements in secret. And just as Eric suspected, the man was not loyal. The report detailed how he had been seen meeting someone in the suburbs the previous night. Back when his father first suggested an engagement with the House of Crispin, Eric had been the only one to find it strange. At first glance, the proposal seemed perfectly natural, reasonable even. To everyone else, it made complete sense. But for some reason, Eric couldn't shake off the feeling that something was off. From that day onward, he began quietly keeping an eye on his father's actions. It was around that time he discovered that a barmaid had been frequenting his father's quarters. For Eric, it was the first time he had seen his father falter from the moral standards he had always upheld. Still, he chose not to make an issue of it. The war was far more important, and his focus had to remain on that. Even so, he had investigated the woman, suspecting she might have been planted by someone with ulterior motives. Yet, he found nothing. With no proof and no leads, he turned a blind eye. But after the war ended, things escalated. His father brought the woman back to their nation, going so far as to force his right-hand man, Sir Kelvinig, to take her as a second wife. Such devotion to a mere barmaid left Eric no choice. He gathered evidence of his father's conduct and sent a detailed letter to Lady Cladonay. Today, her reply finally came. "Do not send me any further reports of this matter. Let others have him. In fact, I feel relieved that I no longer have to dine with him." Those were Lady Cladonay's words. Eric sighed deeply, leaning back. He wasn't surprised by her response. In truth, his parents' marriage had always felt more like a business arrangement than anything resembling affection. Perhaps this outcome was only natural. His thoughts drifted as he tried to sort through the mess in his mind. And then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed movement. The princess had sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes like a child waking from a nap. The princess wandered barefoot through the quiet halls. She walked toward the faint glow of candlelight. She approached slowly, and he looked up, startled. "My lady," he said firmly. "Is there anything you need?" Without warning, she rushed forward, clutching at his chest as if seeking warmth and safety, and sat on his lap. Eric's eyes widened in surprise, his body stiffening at her sudden closeness. Her gaze dropped to the papers on his desk. Eric blinked. "Are you curious about that?" he asked. "It probably isn't that interesting." She stared at the papers for a moment, then suddenly began tearing them apart. Eric didn't stop her. He only watched quietly. His gaze lingered on the woman before him. Everything had happened so fast, their marriage, their lives bound together. And now, as he thought about it, this was the woman he would spend the rest of his life with. The day he had accepted his duty as heir, he had also stopped expecting anything from his marriage. It was never about affection or choice. It was responsibility. Miasa's eyes shifted, landing on a particular letter sealed with an emblem. Slowly, she reached out her hand to take it. Before she could touch it, Eric's hand shot forward, catching her wrist midair. His deep voice broke the silence. "Stop." Startled, she looked up, realizing just how close he was. "You can't rip this," he said firmly, raising the letter high above her reach. She stretched out, trying to grasp it, but he held it tighter. "I won't give you this," Eric added, his tone unwavering. "I haven't finished reading it yet." The next morning, Lady Cladonay sat with her attendant, carefully analyzing several reports spread before her. Just then, Miasa came walking towards her, making Lady Cladonay startle slightly. As usual, the princess soon lay down on the floor, falling into a peaceful sleep. "I am not sure how to address her," Lady Cladonay admitted quietly, her eyes lingering on the girl. She turned to Miasa's maid. "How is she greeted at the king's mansion?" The maid, looking slightly annoyed, replied, "Well, I'm not sure." She gave no clear answer. Lady Cladonay's eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering across her face. The attendant leaned in and suggested gently, "Why not call the princess by her name? She has such a beautiful name." Lady Cladonay thought for a moment, then nodded. Turning back to the girl, she called softly, "Miasa." At once the princess jolted upright, her eyes wide as she stared at Lady Cladonay. Then, almost childlike, she grinned at her. "It seems she liked it," the attendant murmured under his breath. Lady Cladonay straightened, regaining her composure. "I can take care of her until dinner. You may leave now," she instructed firmly. The maid bowed and left the room. Lady Cladonay's eyes followed her, thoughtful. Something was off. Of the two maids who had come with the princess from the king's mansion, one tended to the princess with visible laziness, while the other was often nowhere to be found. There must be something behind this blatant lack of effort, Lady Cladonay thought grimly. "I don't know what they're trying to put on us," she murmured. "Go, bring me some headache medicine. It should be in my room." Understood, Adel bowed before leaving swiftly. Moments later, when Edel brought the medicine, she noticed something unusual. Princess Miasa was resting quietly at Lady Cladonay's feet. That was odd. Lady Cladonay was never the kind of woman to let anyone lean against her legs, let alone sleep there. Lady Cladonay's hand gently stroked the princess's hair, her expression softening in a way rarely seen. "The child... You said she was 20, right? I've heard that half of the court was butchered before her eyes when she was only a child. No wonder she went mad," she murmured. Her fingers moved through Misa's hair like a mother soothing her daughter. "Ever since, everyone has been using her for their own benefit. Such a poor child." Adil stood silently, listening to her mistress's quiet words. Lady Cladonay's eyes lingered on the girl's face. Her features are beautiful, especially the color of her eyes. Adil followed her gaze. Only then did she realize how close Lady Cladonay had grown to the princess. Come to think of it, the princess had the same eye color as Lady Cladonay's late daughter. Perhaps that was why the princess seemed to stir something in her mistress's heart. "Miasa," Lady Cladonay said softly, "let's cut your nails a little, and brush your hair too." Meanwhile, when Eric was finally free from his training, he, as usual, asked after the princess. "She is with Lady Cladonay," the attendant replied. Without hesitation, Eric made his way to his mother's quarters. But when he entered and saw the sight before him, he froze in shock. Lady Cladonay herself was seated with the princess's feet in her lap, preparing to cut her nails. "What are you doing?" Eric's voice was sharp, almost disbelieving. Lady Cladonay looked up calmly. "Oh, I was just about to cut Miasa's toenails so she can walk comfortably." Eric stared, stunned. His mother, showing affection. Lady Cladonay was a woman who could occasionally pity someone, yes, but never like this, never so tender. She had been cold and relentlessly rational even to him, her own son. Yet now, that gentle look in her eyes. It was the very same look she had once reserved for his sister, Rosier. His chest tightened. "If she is projecting Rosier onto the princess, then I cannot allow it. I will do it. Please, give me the scissors," Eric said firmly as he stepped forward. For a moment, he wavered inside. He remembered his mother's face on the day Rosier died, an expression etched with something between anguish and obsession. Was it right to stop her now, or was he only denying her a fragile comfort? Still, he took the scissors into his own hands. As his strong hands held her delicate feet, Misa glanced quickly at him. The touch tickled her slightly, but she didn't flinch or resist. She simply lay there in silence. Some time passed quietly, until Idil noticed a faint frown forming on the princess's face. Unsure of the cause, she thought for a moment, then quickly picked up a small sweet cookie and held it to the princess's lips. Misa accepted it without a word, nibbling quietly. Idil exhaled in relief. "Why did you do that?" Eric asked, his eyes narrowing toward her. "Oh, I just remembered the princess seemed to be fond of sweet things," Idil explained carefully. "I see." Eric gave a short nod, acknowledging her answer. Lady Cladonnay, watching from her seat, smiled faintly. Her voice softened with quiet joy as she murmured, "How lovely. She truly does seem to enjoy it." That night, Eric sat with the princess, feeding her with his own hand. Patiently, he reminded her, "Chew slowly, don't swallow it all at once." He watched her carefully, almost as though teaching a child. But even as he guided her, his thoughts drifted. He couldn't understand why his mother was reminded of Rosier whenever she looked at the princess. If it was just because of her eye color, then even his cousin Amberic, who shared the same shade, should have stirred the same tenderness. Yet never once had his mother shown Amberic even a trace of that kind of affection. A soft knock interrupted his thoughts. The attendant stepped inside, carrying a new dish, and placed it on the table. The moment the princess's eyes fell on it, her expression changed. She covered her ears tightly with her hands, her whole body trembling. "Miesa?" Eric leaned closer, startled. "What's wrong?" The princess didn't answer, only pointed with a shaking hand at the dish before turning her face away. Eric's gaze followed, and realization struck him. "Is it because of the roasted quail?" he asked gently. She gave no reply, only avoided his eyes and kept her face turned aside, refusing even to look at it. "I see." Eric's voice dropped, calm yet firm. "Take it away," he ordered the attendant. The dish was quickly removed. Still, Eric's eyes lingered on the princess, unsettled. It was the first time he had seen her react like this. He sat back, his thoughts heavy. Has she fallen sick before from eating quail? Or is there something else behind it? He couldn't help but wonder. The next day, Eric was out on the training grounds while the other knights practiced. He lifted his gaze to the sky. The sun was already high. His thoughts, however, were far from the drills. Did Miesa eat this morning? Yesterday she hadn't looked well, and the worry gnawed at him until he could no longer ignore it. He left the field to check on her. The attendant bowed and reported, "The mistress. She fell into the stream earlier. It seems she saw some fish, tried to get a closer look, and ended up falling in." Eric stiffened. "She fell?" "Yes, my lord. But she was with Lady Cladonnay at the time, so there was no cause for alarm." Eric exhaled slowly, relief softening the tension in his chest. The attendant continued, "There's another matter. The mistress doesn't seem to care for chapel service. At first, she followed Lady Cladonnay obediently, but once they arrived, she refused to enter. In the end, Lady Cladonnay left her with a servant, while she went inside to finish the prayers." Eric listened in silence, then recalled how easily Miesa could be coaxed with sweets. From now on, he instructed, "Make sure there are always sugary treats placed on my desk." That night, he sat with Miesa again. This time she was in a far better mood, obediently eating as he fed her. Watching her, Eric felt a quiet sense of relief. He lifted a fork with another piece of food and offered it to her. But before she could take it, the piece slipped and fell against her chest. "Don't eat that," Eric said quickly. "I'll give you another one." He reached out, intending to set the soiled piece aside, but his hand paused mid-air. The piece had landed squarely on her chest. For a brief moment, he hesitated. Then, after a small breath, he picked it up. Miesa immediately leaned forward, opening her mouth to take the piece from his fingers. Startled, Eric pulled his hand higher. "No," I said. But she didn't let him finish. She grabbed his hand, tugging it down toward her. Her cheeks flushed red, her expression tinged with frustration. Then, without warning, she bit his finger. Her teeth pressed hard, but the sting wasn't what made Eric's heart race. It was the heat of her mouth enveloping his skin. His breath caught, and he hurriedly pulled his hand back. The princess blinked at him, startled as well. For a moment she just stared, then her eyes flickered past him. The next instant, her face darkened with anger. With a sudden tug, she yanked at the tablecloth. Dishes and cups clattered to the floor with a loud crash. At the doorway, her maid gasped softly. What on earth is going on? She wondered. Finally, she stepped forward and gently led the princess away to prepare her bath. Eric remained seated, silent. His eyes dropped to his hand, to the faint marks where her teeth had pressed into his skin. Later that night, while the princess slept peacefully as always, Eric lay awake. No matter how he tried, he couldn't chase away the lingering warmth that clung to his fingertips. He pressed a hand over his eyes. She's my wife, yet she's more like a child. She doesn't even understand that I'm her husband. I can't— His breath caught. I mustn't think of her in that way. That should never have happened. Never. The next day, Lady Cladinay mentioned, "We'll be hosting the poem recitation this Wednesday." Eric frowned slightly. "Is there really any need to go through with it?" "Of course," Lady Cladinay replied firmly. "They'll be circling for juicy gossip like hyenas. That's exactly why we must use this chance to show them how well we're doing." The gathering was no small event. Once a month, noble ladies from 3 houses came together to share recitations, exchange views, and, more importantly, gather information. This time, it was House Cladinay's turn to host. But what weighed most heavily on their minds was the fact that Marchioness Crispin and her daughter would be attending. It would be the first time their families met since the engagement was cancelled. Though it hadn't been House Cladinay's fault, Eric knew the Crispins would surely still hold a grudge. After their discussion, Lady Cladinay and Eric took Miasa to the greenhouse. The princess rushed inside with the eagerness of a child, wandering from one corner to another, curiously examining everything with wide eyes. Lady Cladinay busied herself with inquiries, while Eric stood back quietly, simply watching Miasa as she roamed. "Mistress, why didn't you come to our quarters today?" one of the maids asked as she approached, carrying a small bird cage. The moment Miasa turned her head, her eyes locked on the fluttering bird inside. Her mind faltered, suddenly dragging her back to that awful night, back to words her mother once whispered, words that still haunted her. The memory struck like a blade, her face drained of color. She let out a sharp scream and stumbled backward, collapsing to the ground in fear. Everyone froze, startled. "Misa!" Eric shouted, rushing forward. He dropped to his knees beside her. "Misa, are you all right? What happened?" "We don't know," a maid answered quickly. "She just got startled." Before anyone could say more, Miasa suddenly clutched Eric, burying her face against him like a frightened child. Tremors ran through her body as she held on to him desperately. Eric wrapped his arms around her, holding her steady. "As you can see," one maid explained stiffly, "the princess does not like birds very much. Then you should have told us that in advance," Lady Cladinay snapped, her tone sharp with anger. "We look after her every day," the maid retorted carelessly. "Why are you scolding us for missing such a tiny detail?" Lady Cladinay's eyes narrowed, her temper flaring, but she bit back her words. She had been suspicious of these maids from the very start. Still trembling in Eric's arms, Miasa wouldn't let go. Seeing her in that state, he spoke softly. "I'll take her outside to calm her down." Without waiting for approval, Eric carried her out of the greenhouse. His thoughts churned. Could this be the reason she recoiled from roasted quail the other night? He walked until they reached the garden and stopped at a wooden swing beneath the trees. Sitting down, he kept Miasa on his lap, holding her securely. "Don't worry," Eric murmured, his voice gentle. "If any bird comes near, I'll chase it away. You can rest." Miasa tilted her head, studying his face. His profile, calm and steadfast, carried a quiet strength. True to his word, his gaze flicked to every sound, alert to any flutter of wings. At last, reassured, she let her eyes close. Leaning against him, she drifted into sleep, comforted by the man's quiet vigilance. As they sat together, Amberic spoke with a hint of amusement. "I can see you're getting along with your wife." Eric glanced at him, unimpressed, but Amberic continued. "There have been a lot of rumors about the two of you. Even my household has heard what people are saying." Eric's brows furrowed. "Who is it this time?" he asked, his tone edged with annoyance. He knew his uncle was trying to push Amberic as the heir. Such rumors could not be ignored. Amberic leaned back, thoughtful. "Well, there's a maid named Vina, she has red hair, and another servant, Skinny, with brown hair. That's what I've heard." Eric exhaled slowly. He knew Amberic enjoyed his freedom and had no real desire to be heir. Their trust had been forged in battle, from saving each other's lives more than once. "Thanks, I guess I owe you one more time," Eric said with a sigh. "No worries," Amberic replied easily, lowering himself to sit on the ground. His gaze sharpened. "But what's going on with you? Don't tell me you're actually into her, because, seeing you now, it feels like you're overdoing it," he smirked. "People are even saying your wife's feet haven't touched the ground since she arrived, because you carry her everywhere." Eric frowned. "You know she limps. And not to mention the accidents that could happen if I don't take care." Amberic shook his head. "But I don't get it. At first I thought you were just putting on a show to fool the king, but right now there's no one watching. So why are you being so devoted to her?" His voice carried a trace of frustration. His eyes narrowed. "You're not seriously thinking of marrying her forever, are you?" Eric's gaze softened as he stroked Misa's head where she rested. His answer was calm, steady. "It doesn't matter who I marry, as long as they are of help to the House of Cladinay. Now that the princess is part of our family, the king will at least leave us alone for a while. And as for my kindness to her, she knows nothing. She doesn't even know whose lap she's sitting in." I don't want her to be mistreated. Amberic let out a long sigh. Well, I suppose you're right. A few days later, the poem recitation was held. Ladies of various noble connections gathered inside the greenhouse, their voices mingling as they settled into their seats. Among them were Marchioness Crispin and her daughter. Once everyone was seated, Miasa and Eric appeared before them. They offered a few words of greeting, polite and restrained. Yet, under the surface, the air was taut. Eyes lingered on them for too long, silent stares pressing down like a weight. The tension between the two houses was palpable, and everyone's attention remained fixed on them. Eric, however, wasted no time. He lifted Misa gently into his arms, thanked the guests for attending, and prepared to leave. But before they could depart, the daughter of House Crispin followed. "I need to speak with you," she said, her voice urgent. Eric turned, his tone sharp. "What is it? Following me here is an unwise decision." "Then I will be brief," she replied, steadying her gaze on him. "No matter what happens, do not have a child." Her words carried firm resolve. Eric said nothing. He could feel eyes watching them from nearby, and he knew it was best not to respond. The Crispin daughter, who had been clutching a handkerchief tightly the entire time, let it slip from her grasp. "Then, until we meet again," she said before leaving. On their way back, Marchioness Crispin asked, "Did you do what I told you?" "Yes, mother," her daughter replied quietly. All her life, Lacane Crispin had been taught nothing but how to be the perfect lady of a noble house. Yet what she truly wanted, no one had ever cared to ask. That night, Eric sat in his study as usual. His desk was buried beneath documents and reports, his thoughts weighed down. The war had left heavy damage, and now they lacked enough food to last through summer. If they could manage this season, then by autumn the soldiers returning from war would harvest their fields, and things would finally return to normal. Normally, such a crisis should have been eased by the rewards granted to House Cladonay from the king. But what they received were only trivial trophies, a Harlech iron mine, and a single princess. These were the king's rewards. The mine would take time before it became useful, and it could do nothing to fill their stores with food now. Financially, it was not disastrous, but the real burden came from the eyes of the vassals. In his father's absence, they all looked to Eric, expecting him to produce the best possible solution. The responsibility was crushing him more than he had anticipated. As his thoughts tangled, a soft weight pressed against him. From the side, Miasa came quietly and settled herself onto his lap, wrapping her arms around him as she often did. Eric stilled, realizing once again that Amberic's questions had no clear answer. He could not explain it, even to himself. Why he let her close, why he cared for her this way. He exhaled and lightly patted her back. Miasa turned, her finger pointing toward a glass bottle on the desk. Eric reached in and pulled out a single candy he had kept there for her, placing it gently in her hand. As she popped it into her mouth, a small smile tugged at her lips. And every time he saw that smile, his own burden seemed to lift, just a little. The comfort this fragile young woman brought him gave him an odd, inexplicable sense of satisfaction. The next day, the maids of House Crispin arrived, asking for the handkerchief their lady had left behind. Lady Cladonay's eyes sharpened immediately. She knew exactly what it meant. In high society, to leave a handkerchief in the house of one's former fiancé, who was now married, was nothing short of a token of love. "Edel," she ordered calmly, though her voice carried steel. "Gather the maids and search for it. And make sure word spreads that the handkerchief belongs to Marchioness Crispin herself. That way, there will be no unnecessary rumors." Inside the greenhouse, Cladonay's maids began their search, joined by Crispin's servants. Among them, a secret meeting took place between Crispin's head maid and one of the princess's own main maids, the very one who had come with her from the king's mansion. The head maid spoke in a low, firm voice. "Let me be brief. She must be taken care of within 2 years, at the very latest." A sly grin spread across the princess's maid's face. "If you wish, I could have it done by tomorrow." "No," the head maid cut her off sharply. "So sudden would raise suspicion. And we cannot come here too often." The princess's maid leaned closer, her eyes gleaming with a dangerous glint. "Then just let me know. I can come to you." That night, the family gathered for dinner. Margrave Cladonay, who rarely joined them, was present. But his irritation grew quickly at the sight of the princess. A dog would have better manners than her, he scoffed, his voice dripping with disdain. Lady Cladonay, seated gracefully, answered with a sweet, sarcastic smile. "Darling, if it's that hard for you, why don't you ignore Miasa altogether? After all, I doubt she wants any of your attention in the first place." The Margrave's anger flared. He pushed back his chair and stood, his eyes dark. But before leaving, he threw one last warning over his shoulder. "Just remember, we must visit His Majesty soon. Make sure she doesn't have any bruises." In the kingdom of Esquilor, it was customary for newlyweds to visit the bride's family 50 days after their wedding. And so, when the day came, Eric entered the royal palace, Miasa by his side. He bowed deeply. Greetings to your majesty, he said in solemn respect, holding Miasa gently alongside him. Indeed, it's been long since we last met, the king greeted with a wide grin. As usual, Miasa slumped to the ground, lying there lazily. The king chuckled. Seeing as how our Miasa seems to be doing well, I expect we'll soon be hearing news of a child. Eric bowed his head slightly. Ever since their marriage, he had done everything possible to avoid raising the king's suspicion. We hope the same, your majesty. But I'm afraid my wife's health is not yet fully well, he answered carefully. The king's attendant leaned in, murmuring something in his ear. The king's smile faded. With a sharp flick of his hand, he dismissed the servant. His voice, when he spoke again, was dangerous. I don't want my time wasted. Miasa's ladies-in-waiting told me something rather interesting. They said although the sheets were drenched in blood, not a single drop was found when they bathed the princess afterward. That made me think, perhaps you don't want a royal bloodline. Tell me, Eric, are you keeping her intact so that you can cancel this marriage? Eric's chest tightened. No, it's not like that, he said firmly. He had believed his efforts enough to silence the maids, but clearly it wasn't. The king's eyes glinted. It seems House Cladonnet sought to deceive the crown. Perhaps this could even be seen as an act of treason. Eric's face paled. He had never feared sacrificing himself, but what would become of his people if the king struck them down? Come here, Miasa, the king called. The princess crawled toward him. He stroked her head with a chilling smile. My little sweet Miasa, perhaps you'll tell me the truth. Did your husband take off your clothes that night? Miasa said nothing. The king's hand tightened, cruelly yanking her hair back. Answer me, Miasa. His voice had no warmth now. Her lips quivered. Then, for the first time, broken words escaped her mouth. It hurts. Eric's eyes widened in shock. He had never heard her speak before. Here. It hurts, Miasa repeated, pointing to the spot and clumsily explaining with gestures. Gasps rippled through the hall. Faces turned away, shocked and embarrassed. Stop, the king snapped, rising to his feet. That's enough. I have no desire to hear details of my sister's wedding night. With a swift kick, he shoved Miasa aside. Take this thing with you and leave, he spat at Eric. Eric clenched his teeth, fury burning inside him. But there was nothing he could do here. Wordlessly, he lifted Miasa into his arms and left the palace. On the ride home, silence clung to them. He held her in his lap, saying nothing. Miasa, too, remained still, eventually drifting to sleep without a sound. As soon as they returned, Eric's voice cut through the quiet. Make sure no one enters the second floor of the West Wing. The princess's maids exchanged confused looks, unsure of what was happening. Miasa struggled faintly in his hold, but Eric did not release her. Cullen? He ordered his right-hand man, stand guard at the door. No one enters this room. When they entered, Eric pushed Miasa down onto the bed. His voice was low, edged with anger. Now, no one will listen to you here. No one will come. Whether you scream or cry, no one will hear. So speak. I know you are capable of it. Miasa swallowed hard, realizing she had no choice but to reveal the truth. Darling, why don't you simply ignore Miasa altogether? She said quietly. Eric froze, his eyes widening. After all, she repeated, I doubt she wants any of your attention in the first place. They were the exact words Lady Cladonnet had spoken at the dinner table. And that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and share your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this and want to be part of our growing community, hit join to support the channel. Take care and see you soon.